Welcome to the creation of Tank, an Americana and Steampunk hybrid. I want to thank all the men and women who have sacrificed all for our freedom. You have inspired this piece. I am turning this vintage waterfall gentleman's wardrobe into what will look like an old beat up army tank. Parts of it will be drab green, parts of it will be rust, and it all kind of blend together, and it'll look just really like a rustic metal finish if my vision turns out the way I want it to. And what I'm doing right now is I'm marking off with this ruler just along the edges, and I'm also going to put random squares here and there on the actual body of the wardrobe itself, but I'm using this ruler right here to mark it off with a Sharpie. And then I have a bulk supply of upholstery tacks. I'm using Gorilla Glue and upholstery tack hammer. On the thicker areas, you'll want to not drill all the way through. I'm using a 1/16 bit on my drill, and you're going to want to go just deep enough to get the tacks going, but not deep enough to where the tack will just pop in with no kind of effort. That's why you have the upholstery tack there with you. But when you have a thicker drawer or thicker part of the woodwork that you're working with, just try not to go any deeper than this. Like, you'll want to just go halfway just to get it started, just to make it easier. On the thinner panels, like I have on my wardrobe, where this will actually poke through, you'll want to sand those off when you're done. Like, clip them off and sand them just to where they're dull enough where it won't hurt anybody or damage anything that they may want to hang in whatever kind of piece that you're working on. Mine just happens to be a wardrobe, and so I want to make sure that I will make that safe for when I'm done. And that's why I'm kind of using the glue. I mean, it's not absolutely necessary, but it'll help with the lifetime of the piece to keep all the tacks in there securely. And so I'm going to go ahead and get started. And like, I've marked all of my dots here just to keep me lined out. You don't have to do this all exact, of course. And I'm just going to go deep enough to get the tack started, like I said. Finish the rest of those in a bit. Just kind of knock off the debris from that. And I found, since I'm right here on the drawer and I can set it down, I found that just dripping the glue on there is better than trying to put it on the back of the tack. Of course, you're going to have to put it on the back of the tack when you go to a side of the furniture where you can't just lay it down if you're working on a large piece like I am. Just get a handful of these and set them in there as deep as they'll go. Any excess glue that's just out, or if you get it smeared everywhere, I found that denatured alcohol works very well to clean that up. That's actually how I prepped this piece. I sanded it down with a 120 grit and 80, just depending on where it was and how shiny the veneer was to start with. And then I went ahead and cleaned this with a mixture of the denatured alcohol and water. And I'm going to be doing this all throughout the piece. I'm going to be putting random squares that's going to look like sheet metal that was tacked upon there like, you know, ages ago. And then I'm going to be doing a faux metal finish, and we'll just see how it works out. I'm excited about this. What you're going to want to do once the glue is dried from all the upholstery tacks, to help the paint adhere better and for the future, you'll want, I have a 120 sandpaper, and you're just going to scuff that up also. So it's just easier to do that while the tacks are in place instead of individually. So just scuff the new finish off. Nothing too extreme, but you just want to scuff it a little bit. And then when you're done with that, I have my mixture of the denatured alcohol and water, and just spray it down. So if you had any oils on your hand when you were putting these in, or just taking the new finish off the tacks, anything to help the paint have a longer lifespan, that's what you're going to want to do. With wood, I paint with the grain, and I did with most of this wardrobe that I'm working on, but I've made these little pieces right here with faux rivets by using upholstery tacks to make them look like a piece of metal that was welded on to repair something. And I want the metal to stand out more aside from the upholstery tacks, and so what I'm going to do is I let the base coat dry just a little bit, and I'm going to go the opposite direction with my brush. So I'm going this way with the grain for the majority of the piece, depending on where I'm working at on the piece, of course. But and this will also be a part of it as well. I'll get to that in a little bit. But I want these scrap pieces of what will become a tank to stand out more. And it'll help when I go to layer the colors too, because I'm gonna actually make it look like it's rusted in some areas, and this will just really just make it interesting, more so than what it's already gonna be. And also, I want to point out too, depending on what kind of brush you're using, I went ahead and dip into the paint a little bit more, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to create raised spots to where there's corrosive, looks like it's corroded over the years naturally. And so by doing that, this is a clay-based paint, and this packs well. So this will dry with little bumps and whatever on it, because I don't want this to look like a painted piece of wood. I want this to look like metal as close as possible. And so to make it look realistic, I'm just going to go in and let this paint dry like that. Just go in around the upholstery tacks, and you're going to want to cover those really good. Then earlier today, I painted the whole entire thing a layer of black velvet. This is just, you know, one of the DIY's blacks that they have. And then right now I'm using a non-DIY product, but I needed to use it because it was metallic, and so I wanted of course this to look like metal, and I need metallic paint to do that. And so I am using Rust-Oleum metallic accents in sterling silver. I already had some of that paint in a squeezy bottle from a previous project, and then I put I don't know, probably a good serving right here of the Valspar clear glaze. You can use this with any color, any paint type that I've used so far, and so it works great with chalk base and clay base in this case as well. And I wanted to use glaze with this just for the simple fact of the drying time and the technique that I'm trying to achieve. And so I'm using a crosshatch technique with this with various chip brushes. And so I have a brush that I've been dipping into the paint, and then I have a paper towel down here that I'm barely like kissing the brush into the paint, and then also dabbing it onto the paper towel to wipe that off and to create kind of a dry brush effect with that. And then I have a brush, like if I want to go heavily with the silver in one area, I'm using a different brush for that. And then I have I have a dry towel and dry towel and a wet towel, and I'm just wiping away in certain areas with either one, just depending on what I'm trying to achieve with that look. The wet one kind of really mutes the silver paint and just kind of leaves it there, just a really soft look. And so I'm just in random areas, that's what I'm doing. I'm just doing different techniques in different areas because I don't want this to look consistent. It's just going to look like an old worn out tank by the time it's all done. But I have those paints on my plate here, and I was going to tell you too that I'm also using a dry chip brush that something else from a previous project had dried on there, so the bristles are really stiff, and I'm also able to just go back and forth with each layer that I put on here. Like the gray layer, I painted it one direction, and then I have areas of where I put the upholstery tacks in. I changed the direction of the paint there, and so all throughout I done this crosshatch technique. And so what that achieved, because when I went over this with black as I went the other direction, it actually looks, if I wasn't wanting it to look like metal, it actually looks like linen, like the texture of linen. And so with the DIY paint, it dries really hard, and so it left that really nice texture on there. So when I go back and I dry brush with this metallic, it really just highlights it. So just touching the paint a little bit with the brush, and then touching the paper towel as well. And like I said, it does not have to be perfect, and you can go as light and heavy with this as you want, just depending. Like right now, I'm obviously going horizontal with my brush, but I'll show you what I mean here in a minute when I put the paint on heavily, what you can do with the paper towels. So a bit ago, I was telling you guys that I used a crosshatch pattern for the base layers, the base coats, and as you can see, when you put the silver on there, what that's created. So it's just created this really nice texture on there. And when I globbed the paint on there, as you've seen earlier in the video, it's created these places right there. So right here, it's gotten a little thick, and so this will be a good time to show you guys. You put it on thick. Just remember, this has glaze in it. You can go back with your paper towel and just wipe that until you like it. If you want to take that look a little bit more, just take your dry brush with the stiffer bristles and go over that area where you just put glaze on. After the crosshatch layer dried, I decided that some areas I just didn't like, that looked too planned, like too much like brush strokes, and so I wanted to go over it with a silver wash. And to create that, I'm actually using a softer bristle brush than what I did for the cross-hatching technique itself. And then so I just got a little bit of the paint, the silver paint, and so I just put a little bit of that, and it doesn't have any glaze in it this time, and so I just put a little bit of that on a plate. And today I'm using an ultrafine mist bottle. You can find these at Hobby Lobby, and I can spray it onto the plate or on here. These are good where it doesn't just blast all the paint off, and it just makes a softer look. And so I'm just gonna spray some here, and this paint is so thick and so very metallic that it really doesn't affect it, other than it just makes it a softer look. And so I tried it on the other side, and I'm liking the results. And I'm gonna do a couple different things. I also have my paper towel here if it does get too heavy in areas. And so this is pretty thinned out, but I'm gonna go ahead and keep with the direction as I was using before throughout the whole piece, just to up and down and then side to side motion. It's a little thicker there than I wanted, so I'm going to show you guys how to fix that with the mister bottle. So I'm just going to get a good little bit on there to show you guys an area that I'm going to work with. And really, once this dries, it's all going to even out. So I have a pretty good amount on there, and you can still see the black underneath. But what I'm going to do now is just spray this. Don't hold it so close to it, but this is just a really fine mist. Spray till you think you have enough to just work this paint around, and this is just going to create a wash. So I'm just able to thin it out even more, stretch it further down, go up here a little bit. And the big globs right there where the black is showing underneath, I'm going to actually work around those, so I'm not going to mess with those. Just to bring that down, and of course I'm not wanting this to look uniform at all, so if it is lighter and darker than in some areas, then that's just that's fine. That's the way that metal doesn't wear evenly anyway. And so just kind of keep in mind, whatever project you're working on, whatever you're trying to mimic of its natural characteristics. So the look I'm going for here is just a softer metallic look, just to make it look more natural, more authentic, and just doing this throughout the piece. I realized drab green isn't everyone's favorite color, and so when I decided to do this waterfall armoire, I wanted to make sure that I was true to vintage tank. So I just kept that in mind, and so not to overpower the whole piece, and I'm really liking this metallic finish down below, I decided to just do the camo finish that I had in mind on top, and then just let it drop down a little bit on the sides, and I'm going to show you my technique on that. I'm using looks like 4 different DIY colors right now: black velvet, layered chocolate, gypsy green, and faded burlap. Just whatever your preference is. And the same with anything that I'm doing on this. I don't want it to be perfect. I don't want it to be so planned out where it just looks like someone just painted a piece of furniture. I want it to really try to look authentic. And so what I'm doing, I'm using the same brush with each color, and I'm just picking out areas, and I was referring back to a picture that I found on Google of an old army tank, and I'm just picking out an area and just going with certain colors in certain areas. And so to do that, like this green right here, you just dip it in your paint just a little bit, and I'm sorry I can't show you that exactly, but I barely just got enough on the tip of my brush just to blend with. And so I don't want a whole lot on there because I want the metallic to show through. You're just going to pick out whatever colors you want to choose where and how big your space is going to be. But and I didn't want it to look like someone had sponged it on there either. And so when you get your layers and when you go back and forth with each color, and now I'm going to the layered chocolate. I got too much on there. So just that color on top of that, and that really makes it nice when you want to blend. So the next color will go into that, and I can't help it when I'm doing this to think of Bob Ross for some reason, just because how he used to tap on the canvas. If y'all remember him, if you're old enough. And once you're satisfied with that, I'm going back to the mister bottle again because I don't want to blast it on there. And I have this rag that it looks horrible right now, but it's actually working out great because it has color on there. It's helping me with my blending, and it's not too wet, so it's just damp from the water here. And you're spraying that on there. Some's gonna drip, but if it was a regular squirt bottle, then it would drip a whole lot worse. And so what I want to do is just pick up the color that's heaviest and trickle it down like it's just faded onto the old army tank. And so just whatever color that you have, just bring it down, and then I'm just going on to the next. And I'm making sure that if there's places that actually looks like it's painted, you know, maybe you're moving your paper towel around and just making sure that those places don't look painted, and that it just maybe it was look like a factory army tank paint job is kind of the look I'm going for. And every time you move your paper towel, of course, there's a different pattern. You're going to kind of want to do that with your brush too. You don't want it to look planned. And really, like with this, and same with metallic, you're just working with it until you're happy with it. And I'm kind of liking the way this has turned out. And I'm also going to be going back through and making some of it look rusted out. So this is actually going to change a little bit as well. But I wanted to show you guys how I created the camo look. And there it is. Try to talk over the drilling and whatnot out there. We are actually making custom drawer pulls for this piece. This has been definitely a labor of love, and we are thrilled to be doing this. This wasn't a custom piece, no one ordered this, but something that's been on my heart for quite some time. And I wanted to show you a little bit the progress today too. And so coming along, I decided to paint an eagle, an American flag that flows down and that will be faded looking. And so I was able to achieve this with all the texture that I'd put in to this piece. And so I have the crosshatch pattern going on, I have the globs of paint that dried, and what I'm doing now is kind of just taking this art brush and the white and kind of making the feathers using the texture and a dry brush technique. I'm just going as the feathers are naturally on the eagle. I'm just making sure that I'm going that way and just lightly going over this, and if you have lighter spots and darker spots, that's okay too. But just the natural texture, or the natural movement of the feathers, so that's what I'm going to do here. And then I'll even go back, you know, and I'll like make some end and some begin again. And so just kind of just playing with this, and none of this is really going to be like uniform. So maybe something happened in battle to knock a big chunk of paint off or whatever. So that's just kind of my thought process on this whole thing, was that, you know, this is going to be perfectly imperfect. And so just with whatever you're choosing to do, that's just kind of what you have to keep in mind with any project. So I used a number of colors today for this. For the beak, I used let's see, cake batter and queen bee and white swan, and also a little bit of letterpress gray. These are all DIY paints still. The only non-DIY product that I've used for this process was for the shiny and the metallic, but everything else is DIY, because once you touch water to DIY paint, it reactivates it. And so zoned out, sorry. Once you touch the DIY paint with water, it reactivates it, and you're able to blend, you're able to feather things out, you're able to layer and just do different things with it, more so than any other paint that I've ever used. And so I'm just thrilled how this thing is looking. And so kind of imagine with this part right here, kind of imagine the feathers going around its face like that. And I'll go back through too with black and whatnot, but kind of just going down, and even kind of liking that, just kind of hitting it, and that kind of looks like feathers to me. So I'm just thrilled how this thing is turning out, because I was really nervous to paint this bright white eagle on this dark wardrobe, you know. I mean, you just never really know until you try, and that is the whole point with art. You never know until you try. And so I just want to encourage you to try different techniques. Just go for it. I'm just going to change it up. I barely have any paint on here at all. I mean, this is just a little bit too much there. But like I said, the thing is with the DIY paint, I can take water into that and it can just come off. Until you seal it, you really have so much playtime with this paint. So I'm just going to keep playing with this until it's just absolutely the way I want it. If you remember back in the beginning of the video where I was applying these upholstery tacks in certain patterns around this whole piece, you remember that I was telling you that they were going to be like rusted panels. So I'm finally to the point in my layering where I've taped them off, and these will actually be rusted pieces where not sure why these are like rusted or whatever, but we don't really know their story, and so that's the way that I kind of had this in my head that I wanted to do. You know, everywhere else you have this worn metallic look, and then you have your different details and paintings here and there. But these panels, I just kind of wanted to add another technique, another dimension to it, and that's why I'm going to be making them look rusted. And so to do that, here's the colors I'm going to be using. They're all DIY paint. I have the letterpress gray, and I have Summer Crush, crinoline, black velvet, and layered chocolate, and maybe even a little bit of queen bee. So I'm just going to start off with this letterpress gray, and I'm just using a Crayola art brush actually. So these are very inexpensive at Walmart. So I'm just going to be dabbing the paint on there, covering up the flag because the damage was done after the eagle was painted, right? And then I'll go back with the Summer Crush. So this is just kind of like a burnt orange look. Start layering that in. And usually with all my projects, I tend to stick with the same brush. I just dip it in there. So when you look at natural occurring rust, it does kind of puddle up in places and kind of bubble up and do kind of crazy things to the metal, and that's kind of what this is simulating. So when I'm hitting the paint with the tip of my brush, it's kind of leaving the same pattern as it would on anything else. And I also didn't want it to be so uniform, so I'm not going to like go over the whole thing with this technique. Stop right there and change colors, and I'm going to go for the layered chocolate right now. So kind of darken that up around the corners, and then you can even like drag it around a little bit. gonna switch a little bit of the queen bee just to, I don't know, throw something different in there, kind of unexpected. So maybe there was like, maybe they used a piece that come off of something else, and that piece just might have been yellow. Because the Army, I would assume, use what they have out on the field. And got a little bit of the black velvet. Crinoline, and I'm just barely tipping my brush in there, so nothing too crazy, and you just kind of have to choose where you're going to put it. So and all there is to do after that is just take the paint off. I'm sorry, take the tape off, and you're left with this patch of metal. Just adds another layer to this. There it is up close. See all kinds of texture that you can play with. And once this is sealed with wax, you can play with even the dark wax to highlight different areas, do whatever you want to with it. But I think it's going to look really cool to have those pieces throughout. Here's a close-up of the eagle head that I done. I'll scroll down to the flag, try to make it look like it was flowing. Vinegar in with my drab green mixture. It is half water, half vinegar, and a little bit of paint. With the DIY paint, a little goes a long way. Just play around with it. And with the mineral based paint, what it's supposed to do is kind of make little fine lines and some crazy effect. I don't really know how to describe it. Just kind of spidery lines in the clay-based paint. I went ahead and laid this beast down because I wanted to spray it on there and it not drip down. So I even let it puddle in some places. When this dries, it should just add to the worn out tank look that I have going on. I'll zoom in a little bit. I'm not sure that it done the exact technique like I've seen it do on other projects, but it still looks cool nonetheless. I went even sprayed it on the eagle itself and all around because it just kind of shows the original drab green tank colors. It just kind of brings those out as if they were worn there naturally through battle and whatnot.